Bringing Back the Acres. Hi, thank you so much for joining my webinar today. I've had a great deal of fun putting this program together, and I'm going to get started. I'm going to go at a pretty good clip so that I can get all my slides in. And again, thank you for joining. Special thanks to these three photographers of the Acres homes, Leigh Ann Cobb, Tim Hills, and Andrew Parlage. The Acres Galesburg Country Homes filed incorporation papers in 1946. Between 1948 and 1960, 71 acres of former alfalfa farmland became a community of 4 Frank Lloyd Wright-designed homes set on circular lots. The land had trees for climbing, and the stream was dammed to create a pond for winter ice skating. Eventually, the families had a combined total of 13 children, neighborhood playmates. The intent to create a community was achieved with his first batch of residents who cleared the roads, helped each other, gathered together for picnics, and made lifelong friends. In 2004, Pam O'Connor wrote the application for the Acres status on the National Register of Historic Sites, emphasizing its importance as a right community design. The Pratt House, referred to as an inline should not be inclined, but inline design built by Upjohn research chemist Eric Pratt, a former Kalamazoo College tennis champion, and Pat Pratt, a one-time member of the K College swim team and a master of the sewing machine, according to her children. They received their drawings from Wright and learned to build the house mostly by themselves. Here's another inline design that I'm going to be talking about today, the Eppstein house, built into the topography of the undulating land by research scientists Samuel Eppstein and Dorothy Eppstein, who was also a pilot. This was the third one, the solar hemicycle, Curtis and Lillian Meyer house, defined as several arcs joined together for a rounded look and feel and oriented to maximize the sun's exposure. This was the winner of the 2021 Wright Spirit Award. And the inline style David and Christine Weisblatt house is also in the Acres. It's built by the same contractor. It was built by the same contractor as the Meyer house, with the 1961 addition by John Howe and Wesley Peters. Though it's not included in this presentation, I hope to learn more about that house in the future.
Pam, could you please share your PowerPoint?
Oh, you're not seeing it? Oh boy. Something happened when, okay, hang on. I'm going to have to rejoin, I think. I don't know what happened, on the, oh dear. Can you see it now?
Yeah, could you do the, start.
I'm going to just go right from the start again.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
I'm not going to reread it, but that's all text. I'll just show you. Now, is this in the way? Okay, there we go. So that's the Pratt house, which I mentioned. And hang on. This is the Eppstein house and the Lillian and Curtis Meyer house. And now I'll keep going. That's where I think we left off. And also the comments about the Weisblatt house, yes. The next slide is a map included with the 2004 Historic Register nomination. However, it's not the original site map drawn up by Frank Lloyd Wright, which I was told is held in an archive at Columbia University in New York City. Here's that map, and it gives you a better idea of what the acres looked like. We have the large natural area. Then at the top, we have the pond. The Acres entrance is next. The Fonken house, which is not a Frank Lloyd Wright house, but was designed by Willsey and is part of the Acres. The tennis courts on the Weisblatt property. The Pratt house over here. The Eppstein house here. And then the Meyer house down at the bottom. It was 5 homes on 71 acres on circular lots, as you can see, in beautiful nature. And the original Frank Lloyd Wright map is discussed in a great little YouTube video, how to see Galesburg Country Homes with Michael Desmond, youtube.com. This video shows the genius of Wright's circular design, which really allowed a lot of flexibility in how the sites could be moved around. And it was shared as part of a Museum of Modern Art exhibit in 2017. Michael Desmond is a scholarly expert on Wright and the acres. This photo of the Eppstein house to the left illustrates the Usonian principle, very important to the community design, and it is where the home is described as rising out of the ground and into the light. Frank Lloyd Wright's words from his 1954 book, The Natural House. Oops, okay. Today, the acres is marked by this sign, but back in 1946, when Eric and Pratt drove out to see the acres under consideration, a site under consideration, it was just a beautiful piece of natural land chosen by their Upjohn research colleagues who had previously piled into their cars, sharing their World War II gas rationing coupons to view the available land that was out there. Some chose to go with the Kalamazoo Parkwyn Village site because it was just closer to work. Eric and Pat fell in love with this land and they joined the Acres group. I'm having a little trouble here. Hang on. Okay. The Usonian homes were designed as single-story homes, except for the Meyer house, and they were constructed on concrete slabs that encased radiant heating pipes. The Usonian homes lacked a grand central entrance, as obviously everyone knows, but rather it had several doors placed around the structures for egress. Here is the understated Pratt house entry tucked in under the carport. Construction materials were important. The homes were designed to be built with Usonian, automatic, solid, and perforated concrete textile blocks. They were stacked together for interior and exterior walls without mortar and reinforced with iron rods and poured concrete. The young couples could not find a contractor to tool up for this relatively small number of homes and order of blocks, so they had to learn how to make them themselves. These handmade molds were used to make the concrete textile blocks. Without a water source or utilities yet at the acres, they worked with their Parkwyn Village friends at Asylum Lake to build the Usonian blocks. That is until the Weisblatts had water and electricity at the acres. They were the first. Eric Pratt estimated that he made over 5,500 blocks, thinking there would be a lot of breakage, but instead he found the blocks were very solid and very sturdy, and so he was able to use the extra blocks he had for a storage outbuilding. The Eppstein, Weisblatt, and Pratt houses used the textile blocks. The young couples immersed themselves in the detailed building plans that Wright sent them. The processes of their work are documented in a wonderful book published by Academy Press with authors Pat and Eric Pratt. Pat Pratt and Christine Weisblatt traveled to Taliesin at Spring Green at the invitation of Frank Lloyd Wright, so they could absorb, I guess, what you might call the right way to build their homes. Now, I'm not going to read this slide, but I'll just let you look at it a moment. This shows how the Usonian blocks were placed together to construct the wall. Two were used, one for the interior and one for the exterior with air between. And you can see in the left side of the slide how the blocks came together. If I'm recalling right, they had to build one course and then let the thing cure overnight and then build another. The first time the Pratts saw Frank Lloyd Wright was at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts in 1946, where a talk he gave as part of an exhibit. The newspaper reported widely on this, in fact, printed so much, a great long review of the event where Frank Lloyd Wright actually came about 30 minutes late, and they did describe the talk as a bit rambling, but he was very persuasive too, and they were really all in. The second, or the last visit, I should say, by Frank Lloyd Wright to the acres were in the last stages of the home's completion. Wright was in poor health then, and he wasn't pleased with the young builders. He thought their block color choices did not reflect nature. Each couple had chosen a different shade for their block color recipe. That shook the confidence of these young builders, only temporarily though, and they were young. They were in their 20s. Pat Pratt would share some stronger words later, however, about the challenges of working with a renowned architect. Her children can tell you those. Mahogany trim, that is another major element of these homes. Just a stunning element. Although the original Wright plans called for cypress trim, it was at that time unobtainable for the acres owners. Now that could have been because this was post-World War II. Many materials were not available. And the owners, however, were able to source in Grand Rapids from Johnson Lumber a large order, enough for all the houses, of a very high grade of Honduran mahogany. Now, this is only my speculation, being from Grand Rapids. I am thinking possibly that may have been possible because of the Grand Rapids contacts in the furniture industry and the supply chain that they had. The Pratt house was vacant for more than 10 years when the owner asked Marika Brewery and Tony Hillebrand if they wanted to buy it. According to Marika, the owner asked them to do with his house what they had done with the Eppstein home. They had previously restored the Eppstein home, and that home will be described in later slides. Although the Pratt house was not in as dire a condition as the Eppstein house, it turned out that pandemic travel issues extended the restoration. And that's Tony and Marika on the patio on the backyard of the Pratt house. Marika recalled that the Pratt house was in better shape than the Eppstein house. They redid the complete roof. Actually, that always was an issue on the house. In fact, one of the strongest memories of the Pratt children was the leaking roof. Rain brought out the buckets. Everybody knew what to do, although their father, Eric, considered it one of his greatest ongoing challenges and was often on the roof. Another image remembered by son Doug Pratt was the audible cracking noises he would hear sometimes at night coming from the roof as it settled and aged and whatever. Some Pratt house textile blocks by 2020 were crumbling and had almost disappeared in certain spots. That allowed the elements to come in. That, of course, was a main construction priority. This photo is by Tony Hillebrand, and you can see the damage that had been done. This textile block repair photo shows how the pattern came together from the inside of the house and the outside. It's very cool. It kind of looks to me like a lantern, and I'll have a better photo of that coming up. On the other side of the wall are the kitchen and the master bathroom. Typical of the Wright-Usonian automatic style, the Pratt house has a large expanse of glass on the back to erase the barrier between people and nature. The Honduran mahogany window frames flow along the walls under the low-hanging roof and carport. Here's another slide showing a before scenario. You can now see in the photo on the right how much work that mahogany needed on the trim. And it was better. You can tell that it was in better shape on the inside. In fact, the ceiling panels look absolutely perfect. So this was one of the biggest projects, as I mentioned, of the restoration, this exterior mahogany trim. And it took a while, and it took more than one worker to get it done. In fact, it was all hands on deck. Here they are after the mahogany's been sanded, applying the stain or the varnish. The exterior mahogany had to be completely redone in some spots. Note one of the Florida glass ceiling panels, ceiling panel doors, it should say, from the main room being refinished by Bill Hefferon of Battle Creek. Bill was the restoration project carpenter on the Pratt house. Here, Marika is working in the kitchen on restoring the mahogany trim as well. And you can see in the background the textile blocks, and perhaps you can see what I mean by the design. Today, the Pratt interior is a marvelous combination of Usonian blocks, mahogany trim, and that includes the ceiling panels, the shelves, the windows, all of it. The red concrete floors, which have that cozy radiant heating and built-in furniture, and of course, all the other decor. These are the Pratt siblings who grew up in the acres, in order: Lisa Pratt, Nancy Pine, Molly Singh, and Doug Pratt. As children, they were aware of their home's uniqueness, since during dinner, a car might stop on the road with faces and cameras pressed to the glass, peering in the window. The kids would dismiss them as goopers, a popular term they coined in the acres. All the families seemed to use it. Doug Pratt was a baby hanging out with mom and dad at the construction site way back when the house was first built. This year, Marika and Tony invited the Pratts to enjoy the Christmas holiday 2022 at their beloved childhood home. Two of the Pratt, and as you will all probably recall, we had a blizzard then. Two of the Pratts' fondest memories are the tall mahogany trimmed glass doors flung open to nature in the warm months of the year, and the cozy feel of heated concrete floors on bare feet as they threw off their snow-covered shoes in the winter. 13 children, as I mentioned, grew up together in the original community, forging lifelong relationships. Best friends Nancy Pratt and Maggie Eppstein roomed together at college. One last thing. Doug's possibly least favorite memory may have been heads hitting hard concrete floors while they were playing. Oops, okay. Hang on a minute. There we go. When I chatted with Nancy Pine and Lisa Pratt and Molly's son, Jeevan Singh, we sat on the signature Frank Lloyd Wright built-in banquette at the Pratt house. Obviously a beautiful and long piece of furniture, typical of the Wright style. They told me about the grand piano that stood approximately here where the red arrow's pointing, and entertained the musical family of Eric Pratt that visited and sang together at the holiday. The large main room closets were gratefully enjoyed after being added later once the house had been built. Storage was always a huge issue for the young family. The window coverings for the abundant glass were sourced from Hunter Douglas, and I believe that's typical of the people that worked on this house. They enjoyed working on the house. It was so unusual and so important that it gave them all a sense of pride to be involved. The oversight was by sales manager Ryan Hill, who Tony struck up a relationship with over the phone, and he visited the property twice. The trim and the finishes, as we've talked about before, the mahogany panels in some of the houses, and you don't see that here in this photo, but divided the interior modular spaces. Here you see how they covered the ceiling in the homes, the ceilings in the homes. Mahogany was also used for the Frank Lloyd Wright-designed tables, shelves, and the interior and the exterior trim. One of my favorites is that wraparound shelves that wrap around the Usonian blocks. Mahogany tables were built by Eric Pratt with the specifications provided by Wright, but first they were going to be used for dining tables. That's what was specified. A number of small tables that could be grouped together for a bigger dinner. But they were very impractical because the legs were placed inconveniently for diners. So the family transitioned to a more traditional standard dining table. The L-shaped kitchen was first a galley, but was expanded by Wright on the Pratt's urging, here into an L shape. Here, laundry is tucked out of sight behind the refrigerator, and there is an outside door as you go into the L. Note the repeated pattern of the 4 perforated blocks together that make what I was kind of describing as a lantern. And they evoke this light lantern, and that's echoed by these pretty pendant lamps. This long, narrow hall connects the main living space. On the left side, there are the windows to the outside, On the right side, we have the blocks, but if you were further in the hall towards the living area, you would notice, and I'll show you later, that there were windows into the master bedroom as well, but I'll show you that in an upcoming slide. This main space connects the main living, or this hall connects the main living space with 2 bedrooms and a study. There was never any, oh, there we go. There was never any glass in those windows while the Pratts lived there, but there is glass now. And the kids, I would go back to the slide a minute. The kids described how, of course, there's a piece of furniture not here now, but how they could walk down the hall with their toes kind of in the separation between the blocks, although sometimes those blocks created injuries as well. And there again, with another beautiful, beautiful mahogany doors and built-ins as the master bedroom. And then on the master bath, there was really no question of perseverance here, because those tiles in the shower and the refurbished shower were sourced from the Battle Creek Tile Company's back room in dusty old boxes to make them more authentic for the house, and or to include a more authentic detail for the house. They definitely complement those textile blocks, and the textile blocks don't actually look outside. They have mirror surface in the openings, so you don't have to feel exposed. On the other side is the sink, and the way they've arranged that is very clever. The guest bedroom was part of the 1954 addition, also built by the Pratts as their family grew. And there we see what I was talking about, the mahogany partitions that separated rooms. A new modern tub with its wood framework complements the original guest bathroom. And here is the study. This is a beautiful room. This room originally was 2 rooms. It was a 3rd bedroom and a study. And this, of course, was part of the expansion, because as the Pratt family grew to 4 children, 1 bedroom wouldn't work. 2 bedrooms they had, finally that didn't work. They needed a 3rd bedroom and the study. Eventually, the 3rd bedroom and study became just 1 room. The restoration focused on crucial updates and decorative details both in the right style, using lamps, coffee tables, etc. Notice that original mahogany ceiling and the high back chairs to add that right look. Those may have been made at Taliesin by Jack Howe, and they one thing about those chairs, they're more stylish than practical, and now they're bolted to the wall so no one falls over. Oh, on the right, in the right photo as well, you can see Tony's record collection, because of course that really fits with that era as well. According to Lisa Pratt, a retired nurse, as the youngest of the Pratt children, she had to wait the longest for her turn in the 3rd bedroom. It was the pecking order of age. As one child moved out, the next child moved in. And obviously why everyone wanted the 3rd bedroom was that obvious advantage for a teenager of an exterior door. You remember that I mentioned that these homes will have a number of doors rather than one big entry door. So I want to move on to the next house. This is the Curtis and Lillian Meyer house. It's one of 6 solar hemicycle style homes in the world. Here, several arcs are joined together for the rounded look, as I mentioned, and are oriented to maximize the sun's exposure, hence the name solar. This house is published in several Frank Lloyd Wright books, and the earliest example of the solar hemicycle home is the Jacobs house. I have a photo of that in a moment, but I'll just let you take in the beauty of this home, because it is obviously an extraordinary house. We'll see that again. This home was owned by Curtis and Lillian Meyer. This is Dr. Lillian H. Meyer on the right. She looks very smart and a little bit intimidating, to tell you the truth, but I'm sure she was a lovely person, and she often entertained the faculty at Western Michigan University. Dr. Curtis Meyer was a biochemist and research chemist for Upjohn, born in Petoskey, Michigan, and Dr. Lillian Gertrude Hoagland Meyer was from St. Louis. She was a graduate of Washington University with a doctorate in chemistry from the University of Illinois. She was on the faculty of Vassar College in 1935. And I'm going to guess that was because in the 1930s, it might have been difficult for a woman to get a faculty position in a lot of places. So Vassar would have been a perfect place for her to get a job at that time. But she married Curtis, and then she taught two years at Wayne State University while they were in Ann Arbor. And then Dr. Lillian became the head of the Western Michigan University Chemistry Department from 1957 to about 1968. And as I said, she hosted many faculty events at their home. Current owner, Doug Lebrecht, has owned the Meyer house for more than 20 years, and he is now the longest resident of the Acres, a place that was met, although he lives in other places as well. But and the Acres to him was really meant to represent Wright's Usonian ideals. He remembered well when he and Christine Weisblatt were the only ones living there. An acclaimed Broadway vocal artist, Doug Lebrecht has performed at countless venues around the globe. A few years after Lebrecht bought the house, he began the first restoration process. And I will tell you in a few minutes why I say the first restoration, which was completed around 2014. Mr. Lebrecht's appreciation for Frank Lloyd Wright's architectural genius was, as he puts it, the driving force behind the restoration. I want to point out to you right now, and maybe it's in this slide. Well, I'll get to a slide, but I'll repeat it anyways. Most of my information, although I have talked with Mr. Lebrecht, almost all of the information I'm going to share with you about the house and the restoration comes from his website, flwmeyerhouse.com. My philosophy was he tells the story so well on the website that I asked for his permission to share some photos from that website and to discuss it just in the words of the website, which is what I'm going to do. That will say it much better than I can. Now, these are my words, however. I looked up what a solar hemicycle is. Now, a hemicycle is a half circle. In architecture, a hemicycle is a wall building or architectural feature that forms the shape of a half circle. Now, you can see circled on the drawing, that is the Meyer house, a site drawing for the house. And you can see the semicircle. It's a semicircle, or could be in medieval architecture, a semicircular formation of columns around the choir section of a church or cathedral. The word hemicycle can also describe a horseshoe arrangement of seating in a stadium, theater, or meeting hall. The solar hemicycle style was created in 1943 when Frank Lloyd Wright was designing a second house for Herbert and Catherine Jacobs in the countryside near Madison, Wisconsin. The owners rejected Wright's first Usonian concept. They were concerned about high energy bills from a too large home with glass enclosed rooms and 13-foot high ceilings, which must describe what he initially showed them, in an exposed country setting. Too much wind, too much cold air. Wright adapted the Usonian principles to a passively solar, heated, and naturally cooled design and called it the solar hemicycle. It's also known as Jacobs 2. This photo is from the Society of Architectural Historians Archipedia. This photo is from Pam O'Connor's 2004 Historic Register nomination application, and it shows what the home looked like at that time. It does look different, and I'll explain why in a minute. Note, on this house, the Meyers did not make their own textile blocks because of the unsuitability of those blocks to the curving lines of the design. They used a commercial grade concrete block. However, the Meyers did share in the group order for the Honduran mahogany for the exterior and the interior. Both the Weisblatts and the Meyers had the same contractor, I might have mentioned this earlier, for their homes, and the oversight of Jack Howe. So here again is the Meyer house. Though the bones of this house were strong when the home was purchased by Doug Lebrecht, it needed serious work. Brown latex paint covered all of the exterior Honduran mahogany, and the blocks were painted a bright white, quite a contrast. The next slides, as I meant, this is the slide I mentioned, include photos and information available on the flwmeyerhouse.com website. All you have to do is Google Meyer House and it will probably come up. The information and photos are shared with Doug LeBrec's permission and tell the story best. The home is set into the scenic hillside, and the entrance hall is typical of the Wright style compression and release. The steps in this multi-level house lead down to the main level and then further down to a lower level, which LeBrec improved with modern laundry, wine cellar, it should say CELL, there is no wine cellar in the basement, piano hinged cabinets, and prep kitchen. Then the steps lead up to the second floor where there are 3 bedrooms, a master and a guest bath, as originally planned, exactly as originally planned by Wright. The house footprint is the same. Here is a little better demonstration of this, and it illustrates the multi-level design. Set into the hillside, you see that over here is the entry and the rounded element. Here is the main level, which looks like the basement here, but it's not. That's the main level opening up to the back of the house, obviously, as a walkout. And then you walk down to that main living room area, then you walk up to the bedroom level up here and the balcony. This photo is from the Michigan State Historic Preservation Office. 2 Wright specialist architects successively supervised the restoration of the Meyer House, Lawrence Brink and, after Brink's death, John Eifler. Lee Dozema was the general contractor for the project. He, according to a local contractor. According to the website, Mr. Dozema was a trusted woodworker and furniture building who has worked on many Frank Lloyd Wright homes in Michigan. This restoration was completed before or around 2014. Mildew, when they started that restoration, mildew remediation was the first priority, and with gloves and masks, they set out to tear out the carpet and bleach every surface. Leaks in the Cherokee red floor were identified, and as it was just impossible, the damage was too great to salvage the radiant heating. LeBrec would later jackhammer out the entire floor and pour a new one with a new radiant heating system to replicate the original design. Here it is in all its glorious splendor from the side that modern houses are always supposed to be seen from, the back, opening up to the landscaping. And it's got that just wonderful curving roof. The balcony section of the exterior was stripped of the brown latex paint to happily discover the original mahogany beneath the surface of paint was in nearly pristine condition. You see those ecstatic moments when you watch HGTV, when they find a cache of unspoiled wood underneath all that paint. Careful sanding and application of clear Sikkens varnish began the aesthetic transformation of the home's exterior. The first phase of the project took almost a year and a half to complete. This project is not for sissies. LeBrec commented, though the house was still hot in summer and freezing in the winter, it started to become almost livable. The mahogany fascia did have to be replaced, but because of having suffered water damage from the roof. The roof was replaced with a commercial grade white membrane roof. Additions to the living room furniture were made in the form of Wright's design for the 4x4 tables. You saw that in the Pratt house, those mahogany tables designed by Wright. These were small movable tables that could be built from a single sheet of plywood. Building these tables shown in the foreground required permission and licensing. I think what that means is building new tables, replacing tables, required the permission and licensing and sourcing, and then sourcing of specific types of material such as Honduran mahogany plywood. The Meyer House is listed in many books, including The Houses by noted architect historian Alan Hess. This, I hope I didn't go too fast through this. That banquette is incredibly long and beautiful. And you can see the operable windows above it. And this photo is so interesting. It shows how there's a kind of a window up to that second floor that you can look through. According to the owner, this fireplace, and it reminds me of many of the Frank Lloyd Wright fireplaces they have in homes in Arizona. It's got a little bit of that Aztec kind of design that you see in some of those Frank Lloyd Wright homes. According to the owner, this fireplace is fully functional, and he uses it every day that he's there when the weather is right. And it also, he said, it draws from the back, so that's interesting. Here, the stunning lapped mahogany trim also is on full display, just gorgeous. Dining room table and banquette seating in the dining room and living room were reconstructed with slightly different seats because they had to build new. And there's more recline, and it allows a bit more room between the table and the banquette, which is helpful. Custom upholstery was created by Schumacher Fabrics that perfectly complemented the original pattern that was no longer in production. Several other interim additions to the original design were removed to be true to Wright's concept. The stripping, painting, and refinishing was constant through the first 5 years of Lebrecq's restoration process. And an example of the dedication that was required to finish this house, and true of all of these homes, is it took nearly 40 hours of craftsmanship for every 10 feet of mahogany restored. That's quite an equation. While the original design of the bathroom and kitchen were preserved, lack of material availability and desire for a few contemporary upgrades led to selections that the restoration team felt were okay. The original design of the kitchen and bathroom were retained, with some changes considered sympathetic to Wright's design in order to help the kitchen evolve with the times. The red imperial granite replaced, I'm going to show you this in a minute, the red imperial granite replaced the Congolium originally used for the curved countertops. They follow the radius of the house. Floor was insulated and heated, but restored to its original Cherokee red along with the staircases. And there you see the newer kitchen, but you can see the original blocks there and the original cabinets. So upstairs, the walls of mahogany. I wonder if I should go back for that for just a minute, just to give you a chance to look at all the details. All right. Upstairs, the walls and mahogany balcony were repainted and refinished. And what you're seeing there is a plant. You see a planter down there, and it's good. It's very, I guess, very mid-century to have a planter like that. And it once again, the repainting and the refinishing of the floors remained as true as possible to the original design. Those pine floors were sanded and given a clear sheen. This presenter knocked on the door of the Meyer house in 2015. Mr. Lebrecq graciously gave me a tour, but he said, don't take any photos. He was in the midst of a second restoration because a catastrophe struck that year, or in 2014, I should say. Although the house had been fully restored, that same year, Lebrecq left town to sing with the Detroit Symphony, only to return a few days later to discover a heartbreaking disaster: massive flooding due to a ruptured hot water pipe. For approximately 36 hours, 180-degree water streamed from the upstairs plumbing through the house, destroying the restored upholstery, paints, and finishes. The heartbreak, to me, would be unimaginable. Oops, hang on. Oh, we missed something. Well, they had to, there should be a slide in there that describes that they really had to basically go through the whole process again and redo a lot of the work, but in the process, they did a lot more as well. This, the Curtis and Lillian Meyer house received 2 notable awards. They received the Spirit of Wright Award in 2021, and in Doug Lebrecq's words, buying the house was a considerable risk for me. The process was the reward. While Wright's Usonian vision and the idea of cooperative living was forward-thinking and somewhat impractical, it was doable in post-Depression mid-century America. The house is located amongst 3 other Wright houses and 1 Wright apprentice house in the acres. My goal has been not to force the next owner to undo any of my improvements. Wright was a genius, and I'm proven wrong whenever I think there's a better way. I'm grateful for the accolades of this award, but I'm just a singer who's been blessed with the opportunity not to muck it up before passing it on to the next victim. Also, this house was the recipient of the 2019 Kristen Visser Award for Historic Preservation from the Seth Peterson Cottage Conservancy for the Curtis and Lillian Meyer House restoration. The award is given by the directors of the Seth Peterson Cottage Conservancy and is presented every other year to an individual or organization in recognition of past work in historical preservation of a Frank Lloyd Wright or Prairie School building in the Midwest. So moving on to our third house. Oh, one last thing. The Meyers were gardeners, and so the landscaping potential of this house was important to them. However, one thing that's never been built that was on the original Wright-designed plans is a fountain, an outside fountain. And that is something that Doug Librecht says he thinks about for the future, but hasn't gotten really serious about it yet. Today, Doug divides his time in his busy career between Georgia, New York City, and Galesburg. Many thanks to him for providing me with ideas for continuing this research. And the third house is the Eppstein house. I want to say just a minute something about the photographer Leigh Ann Cobb. She really provided just a wealth of photos. She actually happens to be, she's a professional photographer in Grand Rapids and a friend of my daughter's. And because of that, my daughter had the opportunity to stay in the house with Leigh Ann when she was photographing the home. The Eppsteins used over 3,000 handmade textile blocks like their neighbors, the Pratts. They built this structure themselves. The water of Kalamazoo's Asylum Lake created a chemical reaction and residue on the cured blocks as they were making them, or as the blocks were cured. And Dorothy Eppstein recalled scrubbing those blocks with a sponge and concentrated sulfuric acid to remove lime deposits, a dangerous job for her and a dangerous job described by Pratt, who recalled Eric doing that. Another of her jobs, of Dorothy's jobs, included drilling holes into concrete blocks to create a rough rectangle, which would then be knocked out and used for light switches and outlets. This latter job she did while pregnant. That information is from the Michigan Modern website. And by the way, in case you've tried to go to the Michigan Modern website recently, which is a wonderful website, it is currently under reconstruction. So, and should be up according to the website soon, website information from the state. My introduction to the acres and this house began with a realtor's invitation to see the house in 2015, after finding my mid-century modern research online. A few weeks later, at his request, we held a small and formal tour of the house. I know that at that point, they were so hoping for a buyer. That house had been vacant for over 15 years. For our little informal open house, which we had only about 30 people come. We didn't do a lot of publicity. The original plans were laid out on the dining table, and the visitors mused over the home's obvious potential. But it was cold and it was empty and it was a little bit sad. At the time, the newspapers proclaimed it to be the least expensive Frank Lloyd Wright home on the market, with a list price of $455,000. Marika Brewery and Tony Hildebrandt brought the Eppstein house in 2016, and they began to undertake a full restoration, which you will see in the following pages. This is the beautiful outdoor patio on that circular. You can see the circular retaining wall there, and then the patio is the other side of it. Among the many integral repairs, a new structural beam and a new ceiling was installed. Concrete floor repairs were completed. The massive but unglamorous projects, which if you've renovated any homes, as my husband and I have, you know, those seem to really take the longest, and the fun part always is much shorter. But the massive and unglamorous projects included climate control, new electric wiring, updated plumbing, and the installation of a new septic system and French drains. According to Marika, the restoration took a good 18 months and a constant crew of craftspeople. Craftsman William Heffernan, which you will possibly remember from the Pratt house as the carpenter from the Pratt house. He detailed and built woodwork, furniture, windows, and replacement doors, while Joe Farkas carefully painted the interior and exterior to align with the original Wright character. And this is all of Marika's narrative. We brought the house back to how it was meant to be. Our biggest challenge and dilemma was how to protect the house from the humid Michigan summers and the long winters that are extremely wet, then cold. The house had suffered massively from the climate in the past. The previous owner had already discussed many issues and had taken care of some important repairs. One thing I don't have in this, but I'll just mention quickly, is that this house actually had a pool that had been added later. And the owner of the Fonken house, which I'll just talk briefly about at the end, Cale Chillery, he described for my husband and I how hard it was to take that pool out. It was so solidly built. At any rate, they did finally get the pool out, and that's no longer part of the home. In the restoration, Tony and Marika had the textile block stained with a new UV protective stain, specially designed for this house by the Sherman-Williams Company. And that, what you're looking at there is the hallway, basically in and out of the home. As it comes around, as you come into it from the carport, you could go towards the kitchen, or you could go towards the living room, or towards the hall, or into the hall. As you enter the house, the original carport leads through this understated front door that we saw, and leads right, compression release style that everyone's familiar with, to this large open concept living and dining room. And here you're seeing, as you go down the hall, and there's all the beautiful mahogany closets on your right. The fireplace is made of, in this room, is made out of those textile blocks. The built-in platform and geometric wood stools were reupholstered in new knoll and Maharam fabrics. And the room is filled with other Wright-designed built-in shelves and freestanding tables. Actually, when we did the open house, when the house was empty, those were some of the few things that were in the house. Those stools and the tables. I can't remember what else, but there wasn't much. The radiant floor heating warms this room with its and it needs it with its floor to ceiling glass windows. It's the kind of the juxtapositioning of all that cold air seeking, or it used to seep through the glass and then the counter of the warm floors. Here's what they did. They decided they had to install climate control in every room. What that arrow is pointing to is the mini split system, which is a great heating system. And they used that for heating and air conditioning units, because even the most specialty company they could find could not hide these. So there it is on the wall. Then they spray painted it the same color as the blocks so that it wouldn't be quite as visible. And I don't think you really notice it unless it's pointed out. Jumping ahead, those chairs you just saw in this picture, the table and chairs, well, those chairs, it's just such a coincidence. Apparently, Marika coincidentally purchased this set of rare Danish dining chairs in Kalamazoo, I believe. And when the Eppstein children came to visit, they recognized them immediately as chairs that had been owned by their mother in another residence before she died. Quite an amazing coincidence. The large piano hinge doors in that main room lead to that unusual semicircle patio with a brick retaining wall that I showed you earlier. But one of the great features is, as you can see, that sharp tilt to the cantilevered roof that of the main living room. And here it is again from a different vantage point. And you see those stools that were in there, original to the house, and those tables. And here's the Eppstein children and grandchildren, the children and grandchildren of Samuel and Dorothy Eppstein. This room was the site of a reunion in 2017, a reunion of the house with its people, because houses are always about people. Tony and Marika, who are Dutch by birth and Canadian by residence, reached out to the greater Frank Lloyd Wright community once they had completed the restoration, and they invited the Eppsteins to come back home and see the restoration. The Epstein children recalled that building the $45,000 Frank Lloyd Wright-Usonian home, and believe me, that wasn't the original quoted price. That's just what it cost in the end. It was a very large sum for that time, and research scientists were not paid that well. It was a financial challenge for Samuel and Dorothy, both Upjohn scientists, and there was little left. They said there was little left for additional furnishings and decor at that time. So just a little bit about the Epsteins. Samuel, at age 38, married Dorothy in Kalamazoo. He was a research science at Upjohn. Dorothy Epstein had a degree in chemistry, which at the time, and I say this because I know it was true, what that qualified her to work as was an Upjohn research secretary. Dorothy seems to have had, though, a pretty amazing spirit. She was the first woman to finally work as a researcher in the Upjohn labs, promoted to that position during World War II. In 1950, she was a rated Air Force pilot, a lieutenant in the Kalamazoo Air Force Reserve Unit. And in the 1960s, she was an actress in the Kalamazoo Civic Theater performances. She was in turn a teacher, a counselor, a therapist. She wrote a book, and I think I have this title right, Is Life Killing You? And it is not surprising that, like the Pratts, the Epsteins built the house themselves. Back to the restoration. The skylight was a key feature in the typical Frank Lloyd Wright cozy kitchens that rarely had a window. It brings in abundant light. The kitchen was remodeled, however, by a previous owner, so that was not something they had to do. For Marika Tony, they did add their own touches. They added a vintage 1948 range and paired it with two smaller under-the-counter refrigerators to keep the focus on the original aesthetic features of the room. You can actually, at the right, I'm just noticing that you can see this in the photo. At the right of this photo, you can see those red cement floor stairs going up to the other areas of the house. The master bath needed a modern redesign, not shown here, and you can see that that was accomplished. But the old 1950s shower stall was replaced by a larger, more aesthetically pleasing style in vintage green tiles. And those were found in the back room of the Battle Creek Tile Company, as I mentioned earlier, in the Pratt house, in dusty manufacturer's boxes, untouched since the 1950s. Thank goodness these places don't throw everything away. Again, it has a skylight. In honor of those original owners, the Epsteins, Marika and Tony hired a master carpenter to restore all the cabinets, shelves, the ledges in the bedrooms, and throughout the house. And when necessary, they used recycled wood to maintain the original look. Again, here we see those mahogany partition walls, mahogany trimmer on the windows, the textile block walls, the mini split system on the wall there, and the red cement floor. At the north end of the house is a second living room. It follows the house follows the site topography via steps. You get to the second living room with baseboard heating, a fireplace with a wood stove, built-in shelves, mahogany paneling, and a floor-to-ceiling window wall with a patio view. I'm going to go back, see if I missed something here. No, it's just quite a beautiful room. And of course, all the accessories and furnishings are of the mid-century period. Here's the Epstein house study entry. Again, having a number of entrances was the way they designed these homes, or the way Wright designed these homes. And this is how you get into the study. But also when you leave the study, you can go out into this beautiful little patio, completely set into the hillside, and just a wonderful, lovely natural setting. Lots of mahogany trim on that house, as you can see. And the blocks were used for the retaining wall as well. And that's original. When I asked Marika how it was that a Dutch couple living in Canada became so involved with Frank Lloyd Wright homes in Galesburg, Michigan, she was quick to respond with what has driven them through this overwhelming project. It is our mission to save these homes for future generations. Our wish is for the acres to remain intact for many decades to come. I also heard something else, that one reason they looked at the Galesburg homes was that Tony, who loves cars, wanted to be close to the Gilmore Car Museum. And that's kind of fun. She shared that last October 29, 2022, the three houses, the Pratt, Eppstein, and Meyer houses, opened their doors for a rare interior tour with helpers who raised $3,000 for the Kalamazoo Scouts. Not surprisingly, the tour was fully booked within 24 hours and attracted visitors from 7 states, as well as from Toronto, Canada. The owners of the Weisblatt house also allowed the visitors, although they didn't go through the house, to walk through the yard at a respectful distance and see their house. On the next occasion, the 5th Acres house, the Fonken house, will also allow an interior tour, as many visitors showed interest in this Usonian gem by architect Will Willsey. Right before Christmas, December 22nd, Marika and Tony hosted a potluck dinner in the Eppstein house living room with the Pratt siblings. The Pratts described how their parents blocks. He had been taking pottery classes at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts and had some signature designs that were very popular in the community. The Pratts gave a Christmas gift of one of his signature designs to Marika and Tony, and she's holding it there. In reflecting on the thoughts shared by the Pratt siblings, the Pratt siblings shared, here's what I believe. Good architecture affects people. It changes them in subtle ways. Doug Pratt believes that living in the Pratt house in the middle of nature influenced his career in solar home applications. Lisa Pratt, Molly Singh, Nancy Pratt Pine, and Doug Pratt echoed the sentiments of probably, if we could ask, all the children that grew up in the acres, as they shared how proud they were of the brave and bold undertaking by their parents to contract with a famous architect, an intimidating process possibly, and built his startling modern designs. One last thing before I go on, they did say that at school, when they were in school, that the children in school, although they didn't discriminate against them, but looked on them as being maybe a little bit different because they lived out in that community, which was so unusual for the country. But apparently they fared okay despite that. What's left? Well, research into the Weisblatt house, and many thanks to Doug Lebrecht again for his suggestions on that research. And details, if you are interested about that fourth Frank Lloyd Wright house, can be found at https://savewright.org building Weisblatt house. But if you know this, just Google Weisblatt house, and of course, a million things will come up. So you'll be able to research further or check out some of the reading literature on that topic. One last thing, there's also the completion of the in-process restoration of the Fonken house, the 5th house in the acres, designed by Wright associate Will Willsey. We met Kyle, a very nice, fun guy who gave us an informal tour of his wonderful home. So my husband and I could see how it was sited so beautifully into the land. And I read one quote, which was that 30% of that house is below grade. The house is really encircled by the land and has a lovely patio as part of it. Kyle just demonstrated to us, and it was amazing how he's restoring each of the original windows himself after developing first a methodology through trial and error and with a workshop set up in the garage. This project, like others detailed in the presentation, speaks to the dedication of these Frank Lloyd Wright-Usonian homeowners. One of the acres challenges today is to keep in check the growth of nature and cooperatively manage this important historic site filled with the stunning modern homes that draw interest from scholars and those interested in architecture worldwide. Thank you for listening to my story, Bringing Back the Acres, and just a few credits here on my end slide. Thanks to Marika, Tony, Doug LeBret, Kyle Tillery, and the Pratt family. And besides critical interviews, information sources included, and I've listed some of these here. The MLive and Kalamazoo Gazette archives that anyone can access online from the Library of Michigan. All you need is a Michigan library card. The 2004 National Historic Register District Nomination Application, which you can find online. The Pekka Kucha website that has more about the Doug LeBret House, the Meyer House. The Frank Lloyd Wright Conservancy and Right Spirit Award websites, Dwell Magazine, Natural House by Frank Lloyd Wright. Whoops, I had that twice. The Pratt House and Frank Lloyd Wright book, Building a Cooperative Community, 1948 to 1979, as remembered by Eric and Pat Pratt, 2004. And there's the Michigan Modern website, which should soon be operable again. A big photographer to those, or a big thank you to those photographers, Leigh Ann Cobb, who I mentioned is a Grand Rapids photographer, Tim Wills, a wonderful photographer who also has the site Kalamazoo Modern on Facebook, or Kazoo Modern, fun to stay in touch with that, and a book on Norm Carver that came out a few years ago that really covers all the Norm Carver architecture in the Kalamazoo area. And then Andrew Pierlash, who is a photographer that has photographed countless Frank Lloyd Wright homes and has a FLW 500 project. So thank you all for joining on the webinar. It's been fun to share all this.
Thank you so much, Pam. It was nice to have you speaking with us today. We're going to share our screen and we're going to run back to something that we should have done earlier, but we had a few different problems. New share. And we're going to bring up our credits. There we are. These we ordinarily run at the beginning of our session. The mission of the Michigan Historic Preservation Network is that we advocate for Michigan's historic places to contribute to our economic vitality, sense of place, and connection to the past. We could not do the work we do without our members and volunteers. Please consider joining us at mhpn.org. The webinar series sponsor is brought to you through a grant from the Michigan Arts and Culture Council. And our presentation today was by Pam VanderPloeg, Bringing Back the Acres, the restoration of the Frank Lloyd Wright-designed Pratt, Eppstein, and Meyer houses in Galesburg, Michigan. And I want to go through some of our questions. Janet Krieger writes to us that she's been to the acres, and it is a wonderful piece of natural acreage. And her question is, do you know who the first owners of, we had three examples of, say, the Eppstein house, who was it purchased from? Who it was, well, I'll read the question. Do you know from whom the first owners purchased the property? I guess directly from the Eppsteins. Is that correct?
Well, I would say, okay, in 1946, they filed the Articles of Incorporation and the names on the first articles were the Eppsteins, the Weisblatts, and the Meyers, and there was another owner who must not have eventually have decided to build. I believe they bought the whole thing cooperatively.
And this was,
and then what happened? Well, and then what happened? And I thought I had this slide, but I think I forgot to put it in there. What happened was once it was incorporated, I'll tell you. Once it was incorporated, according to the Kalamazoo Gazette article, the lots could be chosen based on on when you joined the association. So if the Epsteins were the first to join the association, they would choose the first lot, that sort of thing. Does that make
I
sense?
see. Yes.
But I
And-
don't know who originally owned the land. Someone had to
Yeah.
originally own it, obviously, but I don't know who that was.
Right. I'm assuming it would have been farmland or,
It was farmland, yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Were there any plans to enlarge this, what I would hesitantly call subdivision?
Yes, there were originally going to be 22 home sites. And they were, I believe they may have been drawn up on the original map. But when 5 had purchased, from what I understand, and I'm not an expert on this, but from what I understand, when 5 had purchased their lot, then the whole group decided to shut it down at that point. I don't know how long they waited, but it began to, I believe, be decided by all that it would be nice to have most of it natural. So then they just closed it off and didn't sell any more lots. But there were I believe there were 2 other families at some point that had bought lots but didn't build.
And do you know if there was any notions of enlarging the size of the original plan, the site plan? Was there any idea that it might get larger, or was it just going to always stay that same lot size? Not the round lots, but the full site.
I can't really answer that. One of the owners could probably answer that. I know that they co-own the land, but they might each individually also own additional pieces of land in the acre.
So originally,
I don't know the
this has
answer.
always been set up as sort of a land condominium where they owned it, or well, I mean, early HOA, basically, they all owned it together, but they had.
It is an HOA. It is an
Yeah.
HOA, but I really can't answer your specific questions on that
Alrighty.
topic.
Anonymous attendee has asked, Pam, you've come to know the current owners. Do you know if they have trouble finding trades and craftspeople to work on their homes? Is it hard to find the right materials for repairs and replacements, and those that meet the Secretary's standards for rehabilitation? I will answer one thing right away. Johnson's hardwood is still in existence out in Charlotte, where earlier you mentioned that they had supplied the mahogany through. And I would also say that 40 hours per 10 feet, that's a pretty, I believe that mahogany is exceptionally hard. And I bet they used a lot of abrasives to get those sanded back down to refinishable state. So, but those are some of my thoughts, and I want to hear what your thoughts are.
All I can say is what the homeowners have shared, and that is, it's kind of, I think it sounds to me like it's sort of a glass half full, half empty. The half empty part is it's challenging to find people who can and will work on these homes. They are very special, but the glass half full, and this is just my observation from talking to people, is that in working with these craftsmen, they forge wonderful relationships and come to really trust these people, and it's just a great experience for all. The craftspeople that get involved in it love working on the homes, and the people that have them working on them so respect those craftspeople that it's just kind of a great, simpatico relationship. That's
Yep.
my observation. Having not gone through this myself, I cannot fully answer it. But the materials themselves, that is a challenge, I believe. I think I mentioned in one of the slides that to finish out the trim and replace trim, that often they've had to find like recycled pieces that they took off somewhere else, or they found in storage or whatever, because it is hard to find original materials.
Sure.
And that's a huge problem. When I talk to a lot of people who own wonderful homes, and that is always a problem.
And you said that the concrete modular blocks are referred to as textile blocks.
They have been referred to that in some of the literature, but sometimes they're called solid and perforated concrete blocks. They're called that as well.
All right. Another anonymous attendee says, Pam, I love how you've interweaving facts about the acres with the personal memories of the people who lived there. memories of hitting heads against the concrete floors while playing. I imagine that those might be a little slippery too, if there's any water on them ever.
Oh.
And
Ooh.
the two girls that grew up together and then roomed together in college, this anonymous attendee enjoyed your connection, the emotional connection that they clearly had with the homes.
Well, I will just say one thing. The more I research and work with the story of houses and buildings, I know that houses and buildings are about people. They're about the people that build them. They're about the people that inhabit them, that work on them later. And so people just are part of the story.
True that. Our next anonymous attendee asks, what's around the acres now? Is it still open farmland, or are there McMansions that have popped up?
That's a good question. You know, we've gotten lost on a couple of our trips, taking the wrong turn. I haven't really noticed big subdivisions of McMansions, although maybe some of the owners have. Basically, it just looks very not rural in terms of big farms, but rural in terms of people who have homes out in the country. That's kind of the way it looks to me. But the acres itself is wild and beautiful and natural. And I think I mentioned in one of my slides, that's probably one of the continuing issues, is how to manage that land when not everybody's there all the time. So
sure. And it looks like, if I remember your site plan, that there's a lot of space, that there's a lot of distance between as you go towards the pond and in another associated direction, that there's a lot of open space before you get to the property, the general property line, the common space property line. So it seems like, at least on some sides, it's still quite secluded.
yeah, a little, yeah. I guess we could say that. The houses are generally in sight of each other, although, you know, not in such a way that you see into the other houses.
Yep. And another anonymous attendee asks, can some of these homes be rented for weekend stays? So are they, any of these, do you know, are set up as Airbnbs?
They were, but I don't believe they are now.
I'm
not an expert on that topic. I don't really want to address that topic.
Gotcha. If I was a homeowner of a Frank Lloyd Wright, I would be somewhat hesitant to set my Frank Lloyd Wright masterpiece up as an Airbnb.
Well, yeah, there's that too, right?
And again, Janet Krieger asks, are local township and or county government officials aware of the importance of the acres? Are building officials, fire marshals, zoning officials, etc., able to work with the owners and apply any variances applicable to National Register listed properties?
I don't know the answer to that. That is a very important question. I believe you'd have to probably talk to the owners about that. I have not researched that, and I am not an expert on that. I don't know. And
now you mentioned that Pam O'Connor had written a National Register application. And I'm sorry, but I don't know, did they actually get the listing?
Yes.
They do have that. And has the group of owners gone to the township to see if they could set up some type of preservation district?
Well, I hope the owners are listening right now, because again, I don't know the answer to that. They do have an HOA and it has bylaws and that kind of thing, but how they interact, and it's very important and a very good question. It would have been good to research that, but at this point, I don't know, but I can see that would be a great thing.
Janet also says in a subsequent listing that she enjoyed your presentation very much, as did I, and congratulations on your research. And we have another anonymous attendee that says they are wonderful photos and nicely complement your commentary. And the last question we have is from Christopher Werner. Given the gradual pitch of the roofs and the sunken patios, have the owners had issues with snow loading and flooding?
There have been issues with snow loading for sure. That was part of the discussion when the Pratt children talk about their father was on the roof a lot. That's basically a lot of that was, melt and freeze, and the whole problem with, part of the roof melting and the rest of it not, so yes, there are definitely those issues. And I think Marika also talked about that in that the climate has been some of the worst enemy to these properties, not keeping the climate constant and stable so that they don't have those issues. That's always an issue. Now, luckily today, and I know that owners have these things, you can always check your heating system on your phone. So that the constant temperature is being maintained, but that's a relatively new phenomenon in the history of these houses.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentation today. It was very nice to have you on. And please, listeners, forgive our glitch at the beginning. And it is at the end of our webinar today, and our next webinar is scheduled for February 23rd. February is Black History Month, and we will have Katie Cook from Kramer Design Group talking about Nathan Johnson, Building Detroit. Again, that's on February 23rd, and again, that will be at 1 p.m. Thank you today to Pam VanderPloeg. And I appreciate your time and everyone who has stayed to listen to the questions. We'll see you next month. Have a great day.
Thank you.